Hello, and welcome to UK Paranormal Files. Tales of sea serpents and monsters date back centuries, and in this episode, we shall take a look at one such case. This is the story of the Beast of Stronsay. Much of the evidence we are going to look at in this episode is taken from a single title that is selected from within a broader collection of publications that were published by the notable and well-respected naturalist Sir William Jardine. Between 1833 and 1844, more than 30 titles were published under the Natural History of series. It is one of the 1839 books within this series which focused on amphibious carnivora, including walrus and seals, that records what we know today as the story of the Stronsay beast. Sir William was a man of science. His interests extended into the studies of ornithology, botany and geology. Additionally, he coined the term ichnology, which is the examination of fossil sample evidence recording the movement of creatures. This may come in the form of burrows, borings, cavities or perhaps footprints. In 1843, he then wrote the founding book on the subject. It is clear he was very active and a thought leader in multiple disciplines. Sir William worked with leading naturalists of high reputation in the preparation and publication of the Natural History series, which was exceptionally popular with the general public and across the social classes of Victorian Britain. In short, in his time, there was likely no more ideal person and team in Scotland to have overseen, scrutinised and effectively endorsed the accounts we're about to explore. To the north of Scotland, there is a collection of islands which are known under the collective name of the Orkney Islands, and amongst them is the Island of Stronsay. Our setting is this island on the 25th of September 1808. In Sir William's volume, he gives over a section to witness sea serpents, and it is here that we pick up on his own words. We turn first to an account of an animal which apparently belonged to this class, which was stranded in the Island of Stronsay, one of the Orkneys, in the year 1808, and which was seen entire and measured by respectable individuals, and afterwards, when dead and broken in pieces by the violence of the waves, was again examined by many, portions of it being secured, such as the skull and upper bones of the swimming pools by Mr. Lane, a neighbouring proprietor, and other portions such as the vertebrae by being deposited and beautifully preserved in the Royal Museum of the University of Edinburgh and in the Royal Museum of the Royal College of Surgeons. An able paper on these latter fragments and on the wreck of the animal was read by the late Dr. Berkeley to the Wernerian Society and will be found in Volume 1 of its Transactions, to which we refer. We can only allow space for a very short abridgment of these documents, which, be it remembered, furnish an account of the animal principally after it had been mutilated, and hence we cannot wonder if the original accounts are both imperfect and contradictory. It measured 56 feet in length and 12 in circumference. The head was small, not being a foot in length from the snout to the first vertebrae. The neck was slender, extending the length of 15 feet. All the accounts agree in assigning it blowholes, though they differ as to the precise situation. On the shoulders, something like a bristly mane commenced, which extended to near the extremity of the tail. It had 3 pairs of fins or paws connected with the body, the anterior being the largest, measuring more than 4 feet in length, and their extremities were somewhat like toes, partially webbed. Probably the sketch is particularly defective respecting these. Dr. Fleming, in his notice of the animal, suggests that these members were probably the remains of pectoral, ventral and caudal fins. The skin was smooth, without scales, and of a greyish colour, and the flesh appeared like coarse, ill-coloured beef. The eye was the size of a seal's, the throat too narrow to admit the hand. Though conveying probably an imperfect representation of the animal, we have supplied above a woodcut of the sketch which was taken at the time, and which from the many affidavits proffered by most respectable individuals, as well as from other circumstances narrated, leaves no manner of doubt as to the existence of some such animal. The previous passage made reference to a sketch of the being. I would like to share this now. Note the shape of the being, the small head, the long neck being measured to 15 feet in length, and the 3 sets of webbed paws. The bristly mane also runs down the creature's back, from its shoulders to its tail. It is a very distinctive shape, and as Sir William's latter description attests, this is clearly not a known and catalogued creature either of his day or ours. In the description, it is clear that great effort was undertaken to measure and catalogue the creature, and the description of its features is very distinct and specific. To repeat his conclusion, he states it, quote, leaves no manner of doubt as to the existence of some such animal. Anyway, the source material then moves on to another sighting of a creature. Given the closeness of time and geography to the first account we've covered, it may well actually be an account of the very same creature from just weeks before it met its end. This sighting was from just off the coast of the island of Coll, which is located in the Inner Hebrides off the west coast of Scotland. The following extract is taken from a letter of Mr. Maclean, the parish minister of Eigg, dated 1809, to Dr. Neale, the learned and worthy secretary of the Wernerian Society. I saw the animal of which you inquire in June 1808 on the coast of Coll. Rowing along that coast, I observed, at about a distance of half a mile, an object to windward, which gradually excited astonishment. At first it appeared like a small rock, but knowing that there were no rock in that situation, I fixed my eyes closely upon it. Then I saw it elevated considerably above the level of the sea, and, after a slow movement, distinctly perceived one of its eyes. Alarmed at the unusual appearance and magnitude of the animal, I steered so as to be at no great distance from the shore. When nearly in a line between it and the shore, the monster, directing its head which still continued above the water towards us, plunged violently under the water. Certain that he was in chase of us, we plied hard to get ashore. Just as we leapt out on a rock and had taken station as high and conveniently as we could, we saw it coming rapidly under the water towards the stern of our boat. When within a few yards of it, finding the water shallow, it raised its monstrous head above water, and, by winding course, got, with apparent difficulty, clear of the creek where our boat lay, and where the monster seemed in danger of being embayed. It continued to move off with its head above the water, and with the wind for about half a mile, before we lost sight of it. Its head was somewhat broad, and of form somewhat oval, its neck somewhat smaller, its shoulders, if I can so term them, considerably broader, and thence it tapered towards the tail, which it kept pretty low in the water, so that a view of it could not be taken so distinctly as I wished. It had no fins that I could perceive, and seemed to move progressively by undulation up and down. Its length I believed to be between 70 and 80 feet. When nearest to me, it did not raise its head wholly above the water, so that the neck being under water, I could perceive no shining filaments thereon, if it had any. Its progressive motion under the water I took to be very rapid. About the time I saw it, it was near the Isle of Carna. The crews of 13 fishing boats, I am told, were so much terrified at its appearance that they, in a body, fled from it to the nearest creek for safety. On the passage from Rum to Kana, one of the crew of the boat saw it coming towards them with the wind and its head above the water. One of the crew pronounced the head as large as a little boat and its eyes as large as a plate. The men were much terrified, but the monster offered them no molestation. It seems to me that it would be likely that these are two different sightings of the same creature, or certainly of the same species. In McLean's account, he estimates the size to be 70 to 80 feet, which is much bigger than the measured carcass that was later discovered in Stronsay. He also tells us that the crew of the fishing boat announced that its head was the size of a small fishing boat and its eyes the size of plates, which again suggests a size which is much larger than the one that was measured. Perhaps the vantage point of Mr. McLean and the fishermen did not permit an accurate estimation to be made, or perhaps in the elapse of time and with the retelling of the story, prior to the letter, some exaggeration has been adopted. I concede some inconsistency exists here with the sizing, and perhaps the two sightings are of two different creatures of varying proportions. What is not in doubt is in the descriptions that we have of the general shape and characteristics of the creature. It has a large body and a long neck, which it is able to raise up out of the water whilst in motion. The carcass revealed 3 sets of paws and was measured to be 56 feet in length and 12 in circumference. The neck was measured to 15 feet and the head 1 foot in length to the first vertebrae. It had shoulders, and along its back ran a bristly mane. All who examined it attested to the presence of blowholes, though their precise location was not unanimously agreed upon. It had 3 sets of fins or webbed paws. The anterior were the largest and measured to 4 feet. A sketch by a witness attests to its general shape, which conforms with the above description. It is inferred in the account that the creature was measured but not removed from its position of embankment because the carcass is said to have latterly been damaged and broken by the rocks, and its pieces subsequently gathered and distributed. The beast was likely too large to move in its entirety, and being a remote island with potentially rough coastal weather, limited human resources and no modern day technology, and a limited time before decomposition, this seems to have been inevitable and an unremarkable outcome. If you look up the Stronsay beast today, however, you may be disappointed in what you'll read. In the first instance, the recovered carcass is now generally ascribed as being what has become known as a globster, which is to say masses of unidentifiable body mass and without identifiable features. Somewhere in the passing of time, so unique was this body, and so different to the accepted modern understanding of known marine zoology, that natural scientists have decided to dismiss Sir William Jardine's account. It is a little bizarre that the main body of his work is still very much appreciated, and yet, for reasons that aren't very well defined, these accounts are dismissed entirely. The account makes mention of the recovery of flesh and bones, which was sent to academic bodies for preservation and study. It is not clear how many people were engaged in its efforts, nor who qualified what indeed was sections of the beast versus sections of body of any other poor creature to have been swept up on the beach at some point in time. But it is said in recent years that experts who examined what little remains from those samples have concluded that they are the remnants of a basking shark. And this is what surprises me. The foremost experts at the time, the great thinkers and natural scientists of the day, supposedly could not tell the difference between this and this. The largest ever basking shark was measured to be 40 feet in length, which is still some way off the measured carcass from the beach. It seems obvious to state, too, that they bear no resemblance in size nor shape to the examined body. They have no neck, they have a dorsal fin, they lack paws and a bristly mane across the back. One of the men who measured the embanked creature even noted that its throat was too narrow for his arm to pass, which sounds nothing like a basking shark at all. I don't know if we can be certain at all if the fragments that were examined were that of a basking shark or not. With the potentially uncontrolled manner of the collection of the fragments of the body, and no way of knowing what levels of controls were in place in the chain of custody, which stretches now over 200 years, who knows if what was being examined was what washed up on those Orkney shores. But please don't try and tell me that educated men and women of the day, who were literally writing the book, so to speak, on the classification and anatomy of all creatures great and small, could not tell the difference between this and this. And yes, the basking shark did make it into the Natural History series of books. It was included in the 1833 book by Robert Hamilton, and amongst other things, its commonality around the British Isles is noted. Seafaring folk such as fishermen and natural scientists alike would be very familiar with this particular shark. Finally, and unescapably, I cannot offer up this account and not acknowledge the likeness and close proximity to that most famous aquatic cryptid of legend, perhaps the most famous in the world, the Loch Ness Monster. You already know the story. A creature of great size and similar shape to the one we have discussed has long rumoured to be present in the Great Loch and nearby tributaries. This legend dates back to at least the 6th century, when St. Columba was said to have encountered the being in the River Ness the day after it killed a swimmer. But when the monster is said to have pursued after the saint, he made a sign of the cross and the monster was repelled back as if being pulled by ropes. Throughout the 20th century, many tales of sightings were recorded, as too were a large number of grainy and inconclusive photos and videos. Millions of pounds has poured into the local economy from visiting tourists. Many fleets have tried to map the loch with sonar and underwater cameras in an effort to record the being, all without success. It is sometimes theorised that Nessie might be a plesiosaur. However, since 2006, it has been established that the skeletal structure of this beast would be unable to support the raising of the head and neck out of the water in such a way as both the Loch Ness Monster and the creature witnessed by Mr. McLean are attested to be able to do. Nonetheless, it might be expected that in the 66 million years since their supposed extinction, any surviving creatures would have evolved somewhat, and these might be sightings of a modern day ancestor. The absence of any good evidence for the Loch Ness Monster, in spite of so much effort and expense over nearly a century of searching, has led me to think that there is likely nothing in the loch. Indeed, there is not much of anything in the loch which exceeds the size of large fish, such as salmon. But in reviewing the case of the Stronsay beast, it occurred to me that perhaps this beast and the creature sighted in the loch are one in the same species, and maybe the loch is not the permanent residence for such a creature, but it is maybe an occasional stopping off point. Maybe the absence of large predators and the availability of fish stocks make it an ideal place for these creatures to meet and mate. And maybe that is one of the reasons in recent decades why the sightings have been poor and the sonars and the cameras have not picked them up. They just haven't returned yet. One argument against this might be access between the loch and the sea, which as I understand it is connected via a river, but which has in the past been ruled out by Nessie investigators as a likely migratory path. However, maybe the webbed feet of the examined being reveals that this monster has amphibious tendencies, and a very short passage via land and obstacles may be possible, and under the compulsion to reproduce might aid its ability to find a suitable location. And maybe if that is the case, a subset of these creatures just have not been at the correct point in their lifespan, or need or want to re-enter the loch. But who knows when nature's most compelling instincts might take hold, and when a couple of these beings might make their way back up past Urquhart Castle. And let's hope if they do, they are not interrupted in their pursuits by monster hunters and Nessie investigators, and that their legend and lineage is permitted to endure. If you've liked this video, please click the thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think the Stronsay beast was. Do you think it's a descendant of a dinosaur? Or do you think it was a globster? And what two of the Loch Ness Monster? If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button and enable all notifications. That way you'll be alerted the next time a video goes up on the channel. And if you'd like to support the channel, then please give this video a share on social media. As always, all that's left for me to say is, thanks very much for watching.